Hi, I'm Jessie Miller, Kindred's Director of ESG and Impact. Today we're talking to Laura Zizzo, a Kindred member and co-founder and CEO of Manifest Climate. With her background in law and policy, Laura is a leader in creating a climate-adapted future. We're here today to talk about Laura's work at Manifest Climate, the urgency around the climate crisis, and the role of climate technology. Laura, thanks for being here today to talk about the powerful work you are doing at Manifest Climate and what it means to be a Kindred member. To start us off, could you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jessie. I've really enjoyed being a part of the Kindred community so far, so it's a great opportunity to talk with you today. I'm Laura Zizzo, the co-founder and CEO, as you said, of Manifest Climate. I've been working on climate change my whole career, from my undergrad when I took that first course on climate science to thinking I need to spend my whole career working on this. I was part of the UN delegation as a youth delegate to the climate conference internationally. And when you did the math that we need to get to net zero by 2050, I realized this is my professional career. So have been spending that time thinking about how I can make an impact, both as a lawyer and as a consultant, and now as a tech founder, trying to bring more transparency into the capital markets.
Great, thank you. I loved your background and love hearing that you went to the UN conference. It's such a special experience, and I'm sure it was really formative to your work now.
Mm-hmm.
So to kick us off, would you give us a bit more background on Manifest Climate and where the startup is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually born out of my management consulting firm. So I say the actual genesis of Manifest Climate goes back even before that to my law firm. So I started the first law firm in Canada focused on climate change in 2009, when I realized the big firm I was working for just didn't really have the right role for me to think about climate and helping our clients understand what matters. The professional services world really waits for clients to ask questions. And I was thinking, well, I'm the expert in this. I can't wait for them to ask the question. I have to think about how to help them understand there's a question to be asked. So started a law firm and then realized I'm actually not practicing law. I'm a management consultant. So 2015, we transitioned to a management consulting firm, and it was going so fast that around 2018, 2019, I said, we can leverage this through technology. So in 2020, we actually made the switch to be a software as a service company. So software first, supported by services. And right now we are about 60 people, lots of clients in various backgrounds on our platform. We help organizations understand, manage, and disclose climate-related risk and opportunity. And as I said, just bringing more information into the hands of decision makers so we can understand how we can navigate the climate transformation together.
Thank you. So you started getting into this, but I'd love to hear more about how Manifest Climate is leveraging climate technology to facilitate this business transformation and sort of where that fits into the wider climate tech landscape. And like you're saying, how that tool can help leaders take action.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. There's a lot of tools out there to help people think about ESG and climate. And, as we were raising money, both for our seed round and the current round of financing we're in, we're saying, it's a crowded space. But it actually isn't for what Manifest Climate is doing, which is how do you actually embed climate decision-making into your organization? We really want to empower decision makers to understand this is your problem. It's no longer just a sustainability functions problem. It has to be embedded into core decision making. But we're in this chaotic world. When we think about climate change, people often feel there's so much information coming at them, they don't know what matters. So what we're doing is saying, how do you move from chaos to simplicity? That's basic complexity theory. What you do is you surface best practice. So our technology actually has developed a database of benchmark of climate disclosures to say, how are people thinking about climate change? How are they talking about climate change from the organizational level? And how can we share that information to provide more clarity to the market on what matters and what they should be paying attention to? It's all about using our AI and machine learning to do more than we could with our human brains to organize this information, surface what matters to people, help them understand how to track and monitor climate trends. And then almost most importantly, from my perspective, how to build competency within the organization. So we have a whole learning and management system to say, how do you train all the frontline workers in your organization on the basics of climate so that they can understand why it matters to them, and thinking about things like climate governance, how you link that to their actual jobs. So looking through disclosures, pulling out best practices, and surfacing what matters for people so they can make better decisions.
I love to see how you're building that competency and making everyone realize that climate sustainability, it's our day-to-day work, right? Going off that, so we're building the competency, but how do you think we can shift the mindset of corporate leaders and also, lower level managers, employees as well, so they can see climate disclosure as a core aspect of business strategy, rather than just a one-off or something they do each year, rather than a nice to have?
Yeah, it's a great question. And often, as a consultant, I was asked, can you help me write my disclosures? And I said, okay, show me your strategy. That's what we should talk about. And we don't have a strategy. Well, then what are you going to talk about? So I think we often say the disclosure can't be the tail that wags the dog, right? You have to have something to disclose, but disclosure and the need for disclosure can point out that we don't really have a good strategy or what we do have. So we often kind of say you actually already manage risk well if you're a well-run business. So this is just another risk, just like in any other economic risk. You just have to put the climate lens on it and know that we're going through a very rapid transformation. So if you actually are thinking about the climate-related financial disclosures that are becoming standardized in a proper way, this really is embedded into C-suite and all the way down. There's a lot of discussion on climate governance, how management is thinking about this, and the processes that are in place to integrate climate issues into core decision making. So when we talk about climate, it's important to say right off the bat, we're talking about both the rapid decarbonization that needs to happen to get to net zero by 2050, and also the need to be more resilient to the impacts that we're seeing. It's important that you can't do one without the other right now. A holistic approach to climate change has to think about the impacts that we're seeing related to water availability, extreme weather events, all of those things. And there's a bit of a flywheel that happens when people understand how impactful the climate related events are to their company. The need to decarbonize doesn't look so bad. So when you think about it actually all together, okay, I need to actually do our part to decarbonize. There's an amazing opportunity to be part of that transformation. And we must do that because if we understand the risks related to the extreme weather events, the climate transformation that's happening on the physical risk side, it's just a no-brainer. So we have to not make it just one or the other. It's a both and. And in fact, some of the more material risks to companies are related to those physical risks, not the transition risks.
Great, thank you. It's super interesting. I love to see how your approach is to ESG strategy and reporting. Moving along those lines, talking about frameworks, it really is like the alphabet soup of ESG frameworks, reporting, disclosure, et cetera. But I know that Manifest Climate aligns with the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures, TCFD, for your methodology. So I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about how your team selected this framework for climate disclosure, when there are so many other reporting mechanisms and disclosure methods that you could have chosen.
Yeah, the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, is really a framework that other standards can actually fit within. So it's not an either or. It's actually the overarching way we organize information. So think about TCFD as if other folks are familiar with the Sarbanes-Oxley rules, but for climate. So it's about how you're organizing your information within the corporate structure around governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. There's 4 pillars of the TCFD. The metrics and targets are where some of those other standards will come in about how do we measure, what do we do? So they're embedded within the TCFD. We chose the TCFD. I mean, I've been working on this, as you know, for almost 2 decades. And when the TCFD came out, it was like, here it is. They've really done a really good job of thinking about how you realign the organizational strategy with the transformation. And we just thought we needed to bring more clarity to the capital markets through the use and through helping to integrate that standardization in all organizations. But it's not just us. When you look at where the regulators are going, over 85% of global GDP is actually aligned with the TCFD and making that mandatory in their disclosures. So it's really a misnomer to say that there's all these different competing frameworks. There's different ways that we can think about how we track and monitor and get those metrics and targets right. But really, the TCFD is the global standard for thinking about climate from a corporate financial decision-making perspective. It's already regulated in the UK, in New Zealand. Hong Kong Stock Exchange is requiring it. Singapore Stock Exchange is requiring it. Our Canadian securities regulators have just done that. Your SEC is thinking about alignment with TCFD. So it is becoming the global standard. And we think, and we've placed our bets that people are going to need some support in understanding that and doing disclosure aligned with the TCFD.
That was a great explanation. Thank you. I know our listeners will find that very helpful as they navigate disclosure methods. Mm-hmm. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about your experience as a Kindred member, which is what brought us here today. So how does Kindred, a purpose-built community of like-minded leaders, help you achieve your professional goals at Manifest Climate or beyond? And how do these connections and being part of a community further your work?
I was really happy to be one of the founding members of Kindred and to know that this exists. And I love the fact that it's from startups like us to large organizations, purpose-driven leaders all coming together to share best practice. And as I kind of said about what Manifest Climate is, we want to do that from the climate perspective. And I saw a real alignment with what Kindred was trying to do kind of more broadly with helping with just greater sustainability in the largest sense of the word. So really excited about that. And I actually am a big fan of the Slack group at Kindred. I love to look and like just see what are people doing, making like you're feeling part of the community, and there's ways that you can interact on that. And once in a while, when you get the chance to join some of the events, you know, I remember one that I read that really that I listened to that really changed my approach to empathy with my coworkers and clients. And I think there's a lot of really great nuggets that you guys have delivered, both to create the community, but also to make sure that, you know, I'm continuing to grow into the best leader that I can be.
That's great. I'm so glad you've been able to access our Slack community, our events, and are using all those different tools to become a better leader, like you're saying. I do think empathy is so important in leadership, and we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah. One thing I'll add, Jesse, I forgot to say is I'm up here in Canada, right? So I'm often on the Kindred calls, maybe one of the only Canadians, but I think the access to a broader market outside of where I am here in Toronto and talking to my American friends has been also a really important part for us, because we really have to work together as the global community of folks trying to move this together in the right direction.
Yeah, totally agree. We don't have a big presence overseas or beyond the US yet, but we actually have one advisor who is based in Ottawa. So we're slowly expanding, and we're glad to have you representing Canada at a lot of our events.
Yeah.
My next question is really around purpose-driven leadership, which I think you demonstrate every day in your work at Manifest Climate. Purpose-driven leadership, it's really the why behind why we do what we do. So what does purpose-driven leadership mean to you, and what impact do you hope to have as a leader?
I don't know, people always say I'm humbled, but I really am humbled by the people that are coming to work with us at Manifest Climate. And I think it really is because of our purpose and the way that we're just focused on purpose. And I say it almost every day. I talk about what we're doing, which is democratizing information and bringing more transparency to capital markets, shining a light on climate-related risk and opportunity. And I think having that purpose behind everything we do helps both rally all of the folks towards that purpose, but also help with prioritization, because we can say, if it's not driving to this purpose, why are we doing it? And is it the best thing we can do to help drive towards this purpose? And I think, you know, a lot of the traditional hierarchy and bureaucracy that often gets in the way just doesn't matter if you have purpose. Like, you can work much more efficiently without all of those, you know, steps to think about, should I do this? Should this be approved? With clear purpose leadership that can help. And it's not just me, it's not just like the CEO that has that purpose, it's every leader within our organization. We like to talk about leading among and leading within. It's not just the C-suite that has the ability to drive purpose within the organization. And I think that democratizing even the purpose purpose-driven nature of what we're doing throughout our organization has really led to people, I hope, feeling empowered, feeling self-actualized at work, and knowing that we're working for something bigger than just a paycheck by being here and working together at Manifest Climate.
Really powerful. I totally agree that every employee should feel like they have a sense of purpose. They really have that shared North Star, something we talk a lot about here. So shifting gears again, would love to talk sort of about things that I've seen in the news. It might just be me, but I feel like I'm reading about sustainability and the climate change and ESG every day. Mm-hmm. So at this point, we're 3 months into 2022, and many people each year, they issue the projections they think what will be big for ESG in 2022 in the climate change space. What major trends or developments do you foresee taking hold for the remainder of the year, or trends that you're monitoring?
I think we're seeing, more and more interest from a broad range of stakeholders on having comfort that organizations understand and are taking seriously the need to think about ESG and climate change more specifically. I think we're having an evolution of how we think about risk and opportunity and how we think about climate change as part of ESG. I'll take this opportunity to say to folks, we don't see climate as a subset of the E on ESG. Climate is a lens to think through everything, because there's justice issues or social issues. If we get climate change wrong, it leads to human suffering. It's not really an environmental issue. It's a human issue. It's a planetary issue. So I think this understanding of the holistic nature of the climate crisis and understanding it really is a crisis and it requires some very dedicated action. I think we've seen over the last year in 2020, 2021, a renewed ambition to think about climate. And I think this is going to be the year of, and I think we talk about this a lot, this is the year of immediate action. This is, stop with these 2050 pledges. Great, we have those. What are you doing now? And I think now there's going to be more scrutiny on each and every decision that corporate decision makers make around how is this actually supporting your ambition. The time to act is now. We have to halve global emissions by the end of this decade. We're not moving fast enough. So I think that really this year, there's going to be more scrutiny on corporate decision makers to say how every decision is leading towards our goals, but also investors and the corporate, the markets more generally are actually asking these questions, and they're saying, I want to know how this is actually being dealt with right now and how you're going to show a short-term plan, not just a long-term ambition.
Yeah, the short-term plan, super important. We got to know what steps we're taking and how we're going to get there, because like you said, time is running out, right? It's the most pressing issue right now, I think. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned investors, so I just want to dig into that a little bit more. I'm not sure if you saw, but a few weeks ago, BlackRock pledged to help their clients navigate the transition to a net zero world. What role do you think asset managers like BlackRock play in transforming the corporate world for a more sustainable future?
I think they are hugely important. The Larry Fink's letter around environment and sustainability and asking for more focus on this is always powerful every year. He's been talking about climate change and TCFD alignment for a while. And it's not just BlackRock, it's, all asset owners and asset managers are becoming more aware of this. And we actually work with many of them. We have a lot of asset managers on our platform. And my advice is just to ask questions, right? And that there's a lot of power to investor questions and investor engagement to kind of say, oh, our investors are asking this. Why are they asking this? And do we have our act together? So I think by asset managers like BlackRock asking these questions and saying, we're here to support you through this transformation is really powerful. I do believe in the power of investor engagement to move in the right direction. And we have to kind of not leave anyone behind. It's not a great outcome if we just divest from all of these, troubling areas of investment related to climate. We have to think about how we transition. And I think there's a lot of power in sharing best practices, as I say, through the asset management community to help organizations understand how they can navigate that, how they can stay investable, and that two-way sharing of information so that we see the continued, economic stability that we want while we're moving rapidly towards a decarbonized and more climate resilient economy.
And one last question. This might be my personal favorite right now, something I track very closely. It seems like everyone is talking about greenwashing. In your opinion, how can companies avoid greenwashing and authentically communicate their sustainability and environmental impact?
Yeah, I love that question. One of the things we are thinking about at Manifest Climate from the product development side is how can we have like greenwashing alerts to our clients being like, this kind of seems like greenwashing. You might want to look back at this. But I think, moving climate into core strategy and finance is, from an organizational perspective, is one of the easiest and most obvious things to do. Because for too long, climate and sustainability has been part of the marketing team. And it has, so of course, things look like a brochure. It shouldn't be a brochure. It should be actually financial disclosures. And I think it's about what function within the organization is actually doing this work and doing the disclosure. That's one thing we really have to look at and ask who actually within your organization is in charge of this. And in fact, that's one of the 11 recommendations from TCFD is saying, how is management doing this? Who is in charge? And I think moving out of marketing and corporate communications and into core financial and strategy functions is key. The other thing I already alluded to is the ambition versus action now conundrum. So I feel like a big greenwash alert is having some plan to say, yes, we're going to get to net zero, but not having any immediate actions. So I think you always want to be looking for whether there's something now that you can say, it might not be perfect, but I'm taking a step and it's a more immediate step than just a long-term ambition. But we have to keep asking those questions. The other thing, it's important not to dismiss ambition, right? I think that there's a real concern with the environmental movement around being supportive enough of the things that actually are steps in the right direction, even if they're not big enough steps. So greenwashing there's a lot packed into greenwashing. It's not all bad, right, is what I'm trying to say. But how do we make sure it's authentic? And it's not just getting some, wins from a marketing and PR perspective with not real action. So we need to keep, pushing for more standardization around how we talk about this and how we can make sure it's authentic.
Thank you. That's really valuable insight. I think it's super important for companies to be thinking about everything you just said. Laura, as we close, just wanted to hear any closing thoughts you have on everything we've discussed here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jessie. I think this has been a great conversation, and we know that sometimes thinking about climate when you haven't before and you haven't been thinking about this for decades like I have is daunting. All organizations have to go through the climate transformation and are at various stages of their climate journey. So it's important to assess where you're at and how you can move forward with that next best step. So really excited to have more conversations with Kindred members and the broader community to see how we can accelerate that transformation.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you again for joining us today and providing such valuable insights on climate action. We're so glad to have you as part of the Kindred community and, like you said, to be continuing these really important, valuable conversations. Kindred is an organization built to prepare and support leaders who are building the future of equitable, socially responsible business by connecting them to the community, experts, and information they need to make more equitable decisions on behalf of their organizations and stakeholders. Our mission is to redefine leadership. You can learn more about us at kindredmembers.com.